Sue Smith sitting in for Aaron Rand, and today we are talking about stuff. Yeah, we're watching the news. We're watching what's happening out of Charlottetown and out of the United States, but we want to know what's happening in your living room because baby boomers tend to have a lot of stuff. And as many boomers are aging, they're thinking of downsizing, they need to get rid of all that stuff, or at least most of it. The problem is nobody seems to want it. The younger generations, for the most part, don't want Granny's armoire, even if they like it. How do they get it into their 3.5? June Cotte is a professor of marketing at the Ivey Business School at Western University, and she joins me on the line. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
So why do boomers have so much stuff?
Well, they were very lucky demographically to come of age and build their families and buy their homes in the beginning of a real economic upswing. And so they just were able to buy bigger spaces than their parents did, have more disposable income, and they ended up filling those houses with furniture and other kinds of stuff.
Yeah. But I think also it's interesting to think about why they would want stuff. Like, I get they had bigger houses, but I think it's also maybe coming after generations of, I don't want to say scarcity, but of more modest generations, a reaction to that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we think about Depression kids and you know, the general economic upswing after the World War II in North America. There was an optimism, there was a materialism that took over in the culture, particularly in the U.S., but certainly also in Canada. And so, yes, and then the baby boom led, you know, those people were part of that materialism sweep.
Mm-hmm. And so is that unique, that kind of material, gathering of material, is that unique to the baby boomer generation?
No, I mean, I think if you go back in history, and a historian would be able to tell you this a lot more, but if you look back to the Gilded Age before or after World War I, before the Second World War, you go back further to Louis XIV, you know, there were always periods where not everyone, but lots of the society started to focus on material goods. They've always conveyed status. They've always conveyed wealth or where you are in the status hierarchy. But I think this is one of those cases where from, say, in the early 1950s until largely today, the role of material goods increased in society as status markers, as valuable things that people put meaning into.
It's funny you mentioned Louis XIV because my mother used to have a dining room set that was like faux Louis XIV in the style of Louis XIV. And I can remember when she was trying to get rid of it, she would say to her 3 daughters, "It's Louis XIV. It's Louis XIV." And we were all like, "Oh, yeah, it's ugly. We don't like it." But on that, so why don't younger generations value this stuff?
Well, there's the pragmatics, which you already mentioned, which is, you know, the physical space and renting in smaller places. So there's the pragmatic of it. But there's also, I think, been a shift culturally to spending on experiences rather than material goods. So I think while there will always be a place for status in material goods, I think there has been a recognition that, you know, perhaps owning the most of stuff is not the way to enjoy your life. Maybe taking that trip rather than buying that dining room furniture. So I think generally seeing a shift away from material goods, which means that, I mean, not that they're spending on inherited goods, but I think the value of them is seen as less important now.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because the younger generation is also really into thrifting, certainly with regards to clothing and that kind of thing. We've seen a shift to that. But maybe it's just not as interesting when the things that you are going to thrift come from your own family home, you know? It's like, who wants that Louis XIV? Nobody, but unless it belonged to somebody else, you know?
Yeah, and I think it does. You're bringing up a very crucial distinction. It does depend on the product category. So, for example, the classic one that everyone talks about is china. Yeah. You know, our parents and our parents' parents, you know, had good china, a lot of people. And they kept it tucked away until there was a very special event, and then they brought out the good china. Yeah. Well, most people now, that's a product category. They don't want extra dishes. They want dishes they can use all the time, and they don't want a lot of them. So you wouldn't see as much thrifting for that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But clothing, which can show off your uniqueness, your authenticity, that makes sense to me as something that you would thrift because then you're getting away from the mass merchandise culture of everybody buying their clothes at Zara or H&M. You actually find something different and unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I don't understand why that doesn't transfer to stuff like, glasses and to a larger extent furniture. Why is it better to buy something from Wayfair than something that has its own story? Because then you can also be authentic with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Now you're prompting research ideas in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not sure. But it definitely does depend by product category.
So I understand that you really recently went through this yourself.
I did, yes. I've lost both my parents in the last 8 years or so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what was that process like for you?
Well, it's difficult because you're, in my parents' case, they really didn't downsize. And so there was an entire house of stuff. Yeah. And in fact, when they retired, they probably bought the largest home that they'd purchased in their life. So there was a lot of stuff, and they didn't really plan for getting rid of it. Yeah. And so, the difficult part is not the pragmatic, where do I put this? Like, who do I give it to? How do I dispose of it? It's the emotional side. Because these are often things that you grew up with as a child. You saw them in your house your whole life. Mm-hmm. They had meaning for your parents. You remember them. Yeah. They have a nostalgic meaning, but you also can't really find a use for them. But it's difficult to either throw them away or even give them away. It's a little bit hard to do. Yeah. Emotionally.
It's hard for sure. I mean, I've been telling the story because I went through a very similar experience with my mother's house, which was crammed with stuff of her own because she also liked stuff. But then she also inherited a bunch of stuff from her mother. And she would always say, like, it's going to be your problem one day. And it was, Yeah, and it was hard to get rid of stuff, Mm-hmm. So what did your kids want? Do your kids want any of it or some of it or?
Some of it. So you talk about thrifting clothes. And so some of my father's, really good jackets and cufflinks and things like that, my sons now have. Mm-hmm. My sisters and I took a lot of my mom's jewelry and I took several of her really pretty sweaters and things like that. The things that we remember them by, but are also things that we can use. Mm-hmm. But in terms of things that are just going to sit around that we're not actually going to use, there was not much uptake. Yeah. So it was much more the things that we could actually envision incorporating into our life that were typically distributed to the family, and then everything else was either donated or trashed.
Although we did hear from a listener earlier who turned his nose up at a bunch of figurines that turned out to be super valuable collector's items, and someone else made a bundle on them. So I guess you have to do some research too. Well, listen, great talking to you, June. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, I'm Ruby Carr, the host of the podcast Encore. Check out our brand new episodes featuring music from the show that everyone is reheating as we speak, Heated Rivalry. Join me as I go behind the songs that brought Shane and Elia together. I'll tell you the stories of Feist, My Moon, My Man, Wolf Parade's I'll Believe in Anything, and Tattoo's All the Things She Said, and how they all became a part of this global phenomenon. Stream Encore on iHeartRadio, Crave, or wherever you get your podcasts.